All right, welcome everyone to Faces and Places in Fashion. We are having another alumni event, so thank you for all of those who've come as guests today as part of our alumni. As you will find out here shortly, we also have an alumni speaking with us, so we always like to try and make that available to our alumni, so welcome. And also I see a couple of other faces that aren't in this class, so welcome. You're always welcome to come. We have this class every Monday at 4:15. It's always a great opportunity to hear from different speakers in the industry. A couple of class-related notes. I do have papers graded, everything that you've turned in thus far, so I think I've turned most of them back to you. If you didn't get something back, you can see me after class. I'll make sure that you get that. As a reminder, your current issues critique is due next week. Make sure that you have that typed out and also staple it and make sure that you have your section number on it so that we can organize that and get it back to you quickly. Since I'm at it, just as a reminder then on the other assignments, your fashion event critiques, you have until April 20th, and on your lecture preparation questions, you have May 11th, as we're sort of hitting the middle of the semester. So, and I think that sort of does it in terms of the notes, except as a reminder, MAC Cosmetics, as I mentioned last week, won't be coming, so we will have James Reed, the CEO of Ashley Stewart, attending on that April, I believe it's the 6th. So make sure that if you're planning on doing that as one of your preparations, that you change your speaker there. All right, so as I said, really excited to have our speaker today. It's always great to have alumni come back to FIT and to be able to speak with us. It's always nice to kind of connect the dots in terms of, you know, once you leave here, what happens and where can you go? So today we have Aparna Dasgupta. She's the founder and principal of LifeStylist NYC, a marketing and business strategy consultancy serving startups. She bridges the gap between passion and success. Her mission is to help entrepreneurs of all walks take their ideas to the next level, from creatives and sole proprietors to small business and startups. As a graduate of FIT, Aparna's past ventures include a talent collective, which produced shows for emerging designers, her own eponymous line, Dasgupta. And before launching LifeStylist NYC, she worked with designer labels DKNY, Vera Wang, Anne Klein, and Ellen Tracy. And she's been featured in Women's Wear Daily and Vogue Korea, the New York Times, and most recently, Cosmopolitan. Today, we're going to be doing this as a moderated conversation, and so it's wonderful to have our second speaker here who will be asking all of the heavy, hard questions, Stephanie Benedetto. Stephanie is a corporate attorney turned fashion tech entrepreneur. Stephanie is the CEO and founder of Queen of Raw, an e-commerce platform and mobile app connecting students and independent designers to suppliers of innovative and sustainable fabrics. Prior to starting Queen of Raw, Stephanie attended Emory University School of Law, worked at Baker Botts LLP in fashion, media, entertainment, and technology in New York, and co-founded Paper No. 9, a sustainable textile manufacturing facility based in Brooklyn. She is an advocate for women in business and sustainable fashion. Her companies have been featured in Vogue, WWD, Elle, InStyle, New York Magazine, Wallpaper, and many more. And she was recently nominated as a founder to watch by Women 2.0 and was a finalist for the $1 million Verizon Powerful Answers Award and the WGSN Global Fashion Award. So we have two excellent speakers today. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming to FIT, and we'll invite you to the stage.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Stephanie Benedetto, and this is Aparna Dasgupta. We both started businesses, as you heard, in the last few years, those that you see up on the slide, and we actually met through a lean-in networking event last year. Since then, we became very good friends, and we've also been sharing ideas, supporting each other's businesses, clients, and giving each other pieces of advice. Before we start, I wanted to talk briefly about why entrepreneurial attitudes matter. We've seen the landscape shift in recent years. The 2007-2008 global financial crisis really left many skilled individuals unemployed. Many of those people were looking for alternate career paths. to use their skills, no longer having to rely on an employer, and instead being actually in charge of their own destiny and able to do what they want when they want. By a quick show of hands, just so I understand who's in the room, how many people are currently looking for a job? Okay, few. And how many are in a job but actually looking for new opportunities? Okay, some. Who is an entrepreneur or self-employed? Okay. And who wants to be an entrepreneur, running their own business? Right. So clearly there's an abundant supply of skill. So how do you set yourself apart from everyone else? Attitude, we think, is ultimately what is going to distinguish you. It will help you navigate all the competition in the world right now and really feel empowered in this shifting landscape of employment and business today. So by way of brief, quick introduction, since you already heard about me, I am a corporate attorney turned fashion tech entrepreneur. As an attorney, I worked in a big law firm in New York City. I was in the media, entertainment, technology, e-commerce, and fashion space. So I've been a job seeker in a big company. I totally get it. But personally, I just didn't feel fulfilled in my career path, and I finally decided to take the plunge and start my own business. So a few years ago, I founded with a friend Paper No. 9, which is a sustainable textile manufacturing company based here in Brooklyn. I am currently the CEO and co-founder of Queen of Raw. QueenofRaw.com is an e-commerce platform and mobile app launching very soon, hopefully in the next few weeks, that will connect independent designers to suppliers of innovative and sustainable fabrics around the world. And I built this platform specifically for students and entrepreneurs like you to empower them and to help you streamline the sourcing process. So, Aparna, I know my career path does not really seem direct or even related, but I can tell you that everything that I learned as an entrepreneur and a business person has really helped me and, in fact, been vital to my entire journey as an entrepreneur. It helped me figure out what I was passionate about and what were the problems in the world that I saw that I wanted to fix. So if you could tell everyone a little bit about yourself, how you got started, what was your career path, and how it began and what you do now.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Aparna Dasgupta, as you know. So I started right here in this seminar class years ago. I was in the intimate apparel specialization. Anybody here in intimate apparel? No? Okay, it's usually a very small group anyway, so. That wasn't my first choice, which is worth noting. You know, I came to FIT thinking I was going to make red carpet dresses, like many of us do, and it was my third choice, intimate apparel, and, well, life had other ideas, and that's where I ended up. I started my career at Komar Brands, which is basically the Li and Feng of intimate apparel. I worked on brands DKNY, Simply Vera, Vera Wang, Ellen Tracy, Anne Klein. I always seemed to be on the team that was launching new brands. This just happened to be the case. So while I was at Komar, at the same time, you know, I still had this itch to do something else. And you know those hours of the night where us creative people are awake and coming up with crazy things. I was, first I started a talent collective to bring emerging designers to a stage, any stage. It was really hard when you're here at FIT, you're making your collections, and you look at Fashion Week, and you're like, wait, what's in the middle? So I created a platform which we did a few shows, jointly pooled resources at a very low cost, which was really my first taste of true entrepreneurship, though I certainly didn't monetize that one. And then a few years later, used that platform to bring my own clothing line to the world. It had already had some traction. So we had a fashion show at Hero Ballroom, which is no longer, but it was a huge venue for fashion shows, and got to launch my collection to an audience of 800 people, it's just pretty cool. Eventually, though, the urge to go out on my own was too strong. I was, each of those ventures was a couple of years, but I was staying at Comar, I was working there, working on all these new brands. And in the last couple of years, I started to get even more of an itch that I needed to not be doing all these other things as a side job. I needed to make my full-time career something I was truly invested in 100%.
So it sounds like even though we have this vision of what we think we're going to do with our career and what we think is a direct path to get there, as you said, life may have other ideas. We may not end up in a place that we originally expected. But it's kind of funny because in that place, you tend to have those really valuable experiences that lead to new opportunities that you never originally thought you would have. So you said that while working at Comar, your urge to go out on your own just got too strong. And I experienced the same thing as an attorney in a big firm. How did you know that it was the right time to make that move? For people who are here, maybe in a job and they're thinking about making a move but not sure, did you have a particular moment of inspiration or was it more like a breaking point? I got to get out of here.
It was a little of both. I always like to say that if you're going to make a move, it shouldn't be 100% because you're running away from something. You should be running towards something as well. Otherwise, you might make some hasty decisions that won't serve you that well. I honestly didn't know what I was going to do when I left. I had been in the industry for 10 years at that point, and it was just one day. I remember it was December 16th, 2013. I was sitting in the office. I think it was a Friday night, 8 o'clock, because that's when I could actually get work done. By that point, I had a huge team, tons of responsibilities, and that was the only time when the office was empty and I could get things done. And I just started writing my resignation letter to my boss instead of whatever I was supposed to be doing, and hovered over that button, and I was like, okay, it's happening. And it was this amazing feeling. I had everything, I suppose you could say, from a career standpoint. A great salary, great boss, great team, office with the windows, But I wasn't happy at that point. I wasn't inspired by the career path I saw before me. You have to look at your superiors and know that ultimately your next step, your next promotion, your next level is what they're doing. And if what they're doing doesn't sound that great to you, then maybe you're doing the wrong thing. So I had wanted to be my own boss since I was a teenager. Maybe that came from, I don't know where that came from. But I just figured, if not now, then when? The timing just seemed right when I asked that question. And I think that is the question you need to ask yourself if you're in that position. As for the challenge, I was in a comfortable place where I didn't feel the drive to work on something in my evening hours anymore. I had done that twice already and seen those things through for several years, but then eventually had to default to working on the day job, focusing there. And I have to say, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that is what will take you further in those early years. You should put the time in and see what it's like to climb the ranks inside a company. If nothing else, that's how you'll learn what you should do when you start your own company. So I had to get uncomfortable, basically, in order to make any kind of change at that point, because let's face it, you have the salary, you have the office with the windows, whatever those things are, you even have great people around you who you like. You're not uncomfortable enough to make big moves sometimes. So I had to get really uncomfortable to the tune of unemployment and basically just leave.
No, I think that's probably really true. It's something we always hear. You have to get uncomfortable. And in this increasingly competitive, kind of cautious, fast-paced world, I think the people who are really willing to take those risks and get uncomfortable will be those who are going to reap the biggest rewards, like you have, personally and professionally. It's kind of like asking yourself the question, what would I do if I weren't afraid? And some people say that if you're not a certain percent uncomfortable at what you're doing in your job, then you're really not challenging yourself and you're never going to move forward. So for you, going from fashion design into marketing consulting, it seems like a leap, a non-linear journey like my own. How did you make that transition, and kind of what challenges did you face in doing it?
Well, one thing I have to say is that the big challenge was finding the path. It's not just deciding the path. I didn't leave my job and say, well, tomorrow I'm starting a marketing consultancy. That definitely did not happen. That moment was not there. It was more being true to what I know, like my skills are, what my interests are, what kind of things give me the greatest satisfaction when working with other people or working with product, whatever it is. It took being very aware of myself and my journey over those years to decide that I would make the transition in the first place, and then let those things guide me as I was leaving, and had this lull of a few months after I left the job where I was like, whoa, this is really interesting, where you don't have to go into a job every day. I had never experienced that, having, held jobs since I was 14. I did not know what that was like. And I had to revert back to myself and say, okay, what do you like doing? What are you the best at? When are you your best? And ultimately, the answer was, for me, helping people pursue creative endeavors is the thing that gives me the greatest, satisfaction. Creative endeavors or anything that's, entrepreneurial. I say creative and entrepreneurial to me are kind of, interchangeable. So, when I had started my clothing line years prior, I could have really used that mentor. I could have used the advisor, the business help, the marketing help. And I didn't know where to even find someone like that at the time. And ultimately, I decided that I didn't decide, I should say. I ultimately became the person I needed years ago to have helped my previous ventures take off, which didn't. But it's worth mentioning that it wasn't a conscious decision, okay, I'm going to be the person I needed years ago. That happened as a byproduct of being true to what I like, what I'm good at, what I get satisfaction from. And it wasn't entirely a leap between industries either, because in fashion, I started out in design. That's what I went to FIT for. And 2 years in, I had a gut sort of reaction to what it was like being a designer in the industry. And for me personally, I couldn't put my creative energies into my day job anymore. I realized I need to use the other side of my brain to make my earnings. So I actually segued into the merchandising and brand management side. There was a 2-year period where I made that transition. And ultimately, brand management, it's a huge umbrella. I didn't even know it existed as a field, quite frankly, when I was in school here. And it came as a result of the work that I was finding myself drawn to in the job. And over the years, the marketing and things came along as part of the brand management job.
So it sounds like you really learned a lot while you're on the job at Comar. Mm-hmm. And I know that everyone is really talking recently about entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. For those of you who don't know, that's where you're behaving like an entrepreneur, but while you're within a large organization. And I read recently that close to 60% of managers are really willing to support the employees within their company who want to be entrepreneurs. And actually, over 40% of millennial employees themselves are very interested in doing this. And in fact, the like button on Facebook, which we're all very familiar with, one of the most important innovations in the company's history, was actually the product of entrepreneurship. It was created by accident during a random hackathon. So what's so important about entrepreneurship, and why should we be thinking about doing it when we're on the job?
Well, entrepreneurship to me is really about making the most of your time on the job so that you're growing and gaining something, and you're not just giving everything away to your employer, which may sound like the opposite of what actually is happening. But so not all companies have programs and initiatives like Facebook where they're having hackathons, and in some industries they're more a little old-fashioned. If you said entrepreneurship to your boss, you'd get a blank look. It probably would happen. And they don't necessarily have programs. The manager's not necessarily going to say, please give me all your ideas so that we can implement them. Usually you're going to feel the exact opposite around you. But you have to realize that entrepreneurship is happening around you on an individual level. And it's basically how I made my career. It's a combination of taking initiative, ownership, and adding your creativity. So when you're presented with a problem at work, sometimes there are ways that you're supposed to do things. There are processes already in place, but sometimes they're looking for you to come up with the way to deal with that. How are you going to address the challenge? That is entrepreneurship. There's a big word, but it's actually quite simple. So another thing is that a sign of an entrepreneurship opportunity is often a massive, ridiculous challenge on the job that has you freaking out. Because it's made you so uncomfortable. You're like, where's the manual? I don't know how to do this. How come they're giving this responsibility to me? I'm going to be here all night. That is the entrepreneurship opportunity. It usually looks like a massive meltdown. So, one example of this where in my career was when Komar acquired the Cuddle Duds brand about 2009. We acquired them mid-production season, and it was a mess. I mean, we had thousands of SKUs that were coming in from another company, different systems. The entire staff was gone minus 3 people, of which only one of them knew anything about process. So we had like a huge catastrophe on our hands, potentially. And I had never dealt with an acquisition or a merger of anything of the sort. However, I had been on all those previous launch teams for all those different brands, and I had a sense of what makes a good system, because I'm kind of a systematic thinker. So I didn't look at that and say, wow, I need a new job, this is crazy. And I know a lot of people have that instinct when things get too unsettled at work and it looks impossible. A lot of people nowadays, I hear, even from a lot of my clients and career clients, they're like, okay, well, it's time to get a new job. This place is going crazy. Actually, that is probably your golden opportunity. So you kind of need to think, who's going to step up and make a solution, and that can be you. It probably should be you. And if you're not up for that challenge, then maybe yes, you go somewhere else. But you also want to think about the fact that if you can't do that for some other company, how will you do it for yourself later on if you have entrepreneurial aspirations of some sort? Think of entrepreneurship as gaining entrepreneur skills on the job.
I think that makes a lot of sense, but when you've got these moments that kind of feel like complete crisis and you're overwhelmed and you don't know what to do, how do you actually gain the experience and the knowledge that you really need to actually be able to accomplish the task and do these things so that people within the organization listen to you and respect you and trust you, both while you're an employee and then eventually when you go out on your own and lead your own company?
Well, it's a challenge, especially if you're entry level, just starting out, you feel like you don't have experience. By the way, everyone feels like they don't have enough experience at every stage of their career. There's always someone who seems more senior or more eligible or more qualified. You're all going to deal with that forever, so just get comfortable with it, you know? The way that you convince people that you know something, that you should be trusted, the way that you can inspire confidence in them to give you opportunities is to be conscious of your work as you're doing it. You need to think about what's happening. Don't just, okay, I'm doing paperwork, okay, I'm drawing a sketch, whatever. Like, what process were you going through? What worked, what didn't? You know, is there a better way to do things? Really, it comes down like, are you awake on the job or not? That's all it comes down to. And that's a huge distinction. You know, in my job, I did a lot of hiring. From my second year out of FIT, I was made responsible for all hiring for every team I was on from that point forward. Because I could make that distinction between those two types of employees. When people come in for an interview as an entry-level candidate, you have maybe an internship or two under your belt and nothing more. But it's the people who can speak to what they did with some kind of pride, understand how that tiny, insignificant job fit into the bigger picture. They understand the value of the work they did, and they can explain exactly what part they played. That's the person who gets hired. They had no experience, really. I mean, internship is experience, but it depends on, of course, how the internship was structured. Some are better, some are not, you know. It's all about whether you can explain what you did, what steps, what process you took. One example in my business is crowdfunding, which I have to bring up because a year ago when I first launched LifeStylist NYC, I decided to attempt a crowdfunding campaign. Just to test the idea. Really, for me, it was to test the language I was using. And this idea of testing came from one course, a few weeks, that I decided to take when I first left my job. That campaign got maybe 10% funded. Yet the majority of work I've done since then has been in crowdfunding for clients who need crowdfunding assistance. Why? Because I went through the experience. I saw what worked, I saw what didn't, I studied the failure. You know, a lot of time people, they don't study success. So when someone's just successful straight out of the gate, they often misattribute their success to things that had nothing to do with it. So, you know, I tend not to trust someone who's just been successful without any failures in the past. And I think the same goes for most people.
So once we're conscious of what we want to do and we've developed the skills that we need as an entrepreneur within a company, the next step, I guess, would be identifying the right opportunities to take. So for me, the idea of Queen of Raw came from listening to my customers at my other business. Independent designers were struggling with sourcing fabrics. They saw the high minimums and there were inflated prices and they had no information about the fabrics or no access to the suppliers of the fabrics. And I had an idea of how I could fix it, leveraging technology, my experience and skills, my phenomenal team, some of who are here in the audience today, and my business relationships. So Aparna, what are the opportunities that we should be looking for to go out on our own as an entrepreneur, and how do we actually take advantage of them?
Well, one example that's great to even reference is your own, is that you didn't think, well, I'm an attorney. What place do I have being in fashion? You know, this isn't my area. You know, I'm just a lawyer. What do I know about fashion? These are not things that you thought. You know, you said more like, why not me? You know, that's the question that anyone needs to ask when it comes to opportunity is, why not me? You know, people are very inclined to shortchange themselves, thinking that, oh, that's not for me. That's something we all think, and I do it too. One example of that is last October, when I happened to see a posting on a message board that I was part of for a feature in Cosmopolitan, asking women to reveal their salary histories and their corporate journeys. And upon first reading, I thought, no, that's not for me. And I went to bed. The good thing is I overcame that by waking up and having a eureka moment where I said, no, that is me. Why am I saying that's not me? And asking that question led me to writing to that editor and saying, hey, this is my story. I was in corporate. This was my path. This is what I'm doing now. And she wrote back very quickly and said, I have to tell your story. Now, imagine if I hadn't written to her. I would have never even had that response, never had that opportunity. And actually, what ended up happening was my story was so much, it was unique enough that it ended up becoming the opening part of the feature in the career section in November in Cosmo. And all of that came from just asking the question, why not me? So a lot of people also don't take these opportunities because they're afraid of rejection or failure. And I'll say one piece of advice to that is, if you don't hitch your wagon to every single opportunity that comes along, thinking, okay, this one's gonna be it, I'm gonna skyrocket to fame, it's going to work a lot better for you. Don't get hung up on the success that might come from an opportunity. Just throw yourself at the opportunity. And if it's not for you, it won't pan out. Simple as that. But if it does, you get a nice email from an editor saying, hey, I want to tell your story and come by Cosmo offices for a photo shoot. Stuff like that can happen, but you have to actually take the opportunity and see that it was for you in the first place.
Speaking of Cosmo photo shoots and how we should dress for the part, on the one hand, we're stressing here that you need to distinguish yourself and have this strong entrepreneurial attitude and take risks and opportunities when they come. But then on the other hand, there's this emphasis out there that everybody hears on dress for success and the need for professionalism in how we present ourselves. As a lawyer, I always wore a black suit. Today, I'm wearing a black suit. How do you strike a balance between the two? The taking risks and standing out from the crowd while also being professional. And I will say, I'm trying to stand out because I'm wearing my leopard shoes. So.
Well, balancing dress for success and professionalism, it's not even so much a balancing act. Really, you just have to present for the job you want. You have to present yourself the way you want to be received. And that takes a little bit of putting your ego aside and thinking about, it's not just intentions that matter, it's like actually crafting your reputation by presenting the way that, how do you want people to view you? As opposed to, well, I'm gonna do whatever and you just need to, like me for that. Well, maybe people won't. And you have to be, you have to just accept that. It's kind of like, if you want to work for a bank or a law firm, you're not going to show up for that interview with a blue mohawk. But if you want to work for Betsy Johnson, that might actually do you some favors. So one of the most defining moments in my career had to do with how I showed up and how I presented. In the 2005, I was part of the FEMI Gala Student Design Contest, which there's no intimate apparel students here, so you might not know. It's the Intimate Apparel Industry Awards night, and everybody who's everybody from the entire industry is there, and a number of students get to present a garment and have the industry vote on it, and then you get some prize. Well, I was 20, maybe. I was a college student at FIT and didn't have some fancy gown or something to wear, and I couldn't find anything I felt was appropriate. but I was thinking about what would be appropriate to wear to such an event. So fortunately, being a fashion design student and having that desire to make red carpet dresses, I spent about 48 hours straight in one of the labs on the 7th floor and made myself a gown. It's one of the few times in my life I've made myself anything. And I showed up at that event looking super overdressed compared to my peers, but I fit in with the guests. And this is all in hindsight, I have to say, so hopefully you guys can take something away from that. But I got several job offers as a result of that night, including the one at Colmar, and I was still a junior at FIT, and those were designer-level jobs. They assumed I was older and more experienced than I actually was because of how I presented myself. So there's a lot to be said for that. And it's not just about being memorable. I didn't make the craziest outfit. I just made the one that made me the best fit, you know? And individuality, we value that a lot here, absolutely, but it doesn't have to be about being the sore thumb. It has to be about being memorable, the best fit, you know?
And that being memorable really takes confidence. And clearly, this wouldn't be a conversation about entrepreneurship if we didn't mention confidence. To go into business for yourself and put yourself and your ideas out there takes confidence. To communicate your story and your values take confidence. For me, I was coming from a background in corporate law. Going into fashion tech took an extra boost of confidence and a lot of quick learning. But for me, I didn't let that dissuade me and really ended up turning that into an asset because I came into the industry and I had what we think was a fresh perspective, and we were able to do things a little bit differently, and that definitely helped us stand apart from the crowd and was well received by our clients and by the industry. So Aparna, do you have any tips on how we can find that confidence within ourselves and earn the confidence of others while we're doing it?
Well, one thing you can do, it's not always about making yourself a floor-length gown. It's speak in the present tense about what you do. I can't tell you how many people say, I'm aspiring, I'm emerging, I'm starting, I'm planning. All those words say is that you have an idea and no experience, which is not necessarily even true. It's just a way of speaking that a lot of us, it's a pattern we all fall into. And I certainly did it at one point as well, until I realized those words just weren't doing anything for me. Speak in the present tense about what you are capable of. You know, a lot of people don't even, students necessarily don't have a business card. And they're like, well, because I don't have a job yet. And I'm like, yeah, but you know your major, right? I mean, what's to say you don't just have a card with your name, your phone number, your email address, and your specialty? I had that when I was here as a student, and I used those cards, Even a few months ago, I was at an industry event and met one of the journalists from Women's Wear Daily who has since decided to leave. And she said, I asked her if she had a card, and she said, yeah, I have one. It's not the company card, it's just my calling card. Mind you, she's probably in her 70s, so that's a thing. And it's just her name and her contact info, and that's all you need to make an impression and get your name into someone's wallet, Speaking in the present tense is really important when it comes to inspiring confidence in others, but it will also start to change how you see yourself. You'll start to feel like you're already part of the thing that you want to do, as opposed to an outsider, which is something we all kind of struggle with at times. So, 7 or 8 years ago, you could say that intentions and enthusiasm were enough to get you a job. But that's not the case, unfortunately, anymore. So you have to, to cut in front of the line, be memorable, and do all the other things we've talked about, is, speak of what you have done, what you're doing presently, and what you want to do as if it's worth something. That's really important. I can't tell you how many times I interviewed someone who kind of marginalized the work they had done prior. That's not someone I'm going to hire because they didn't see their own value in their previous job. It doesn't matter if someone else saw your value. If you can't see your value, you can't communicate it to somebody, no one else is going to see your value either. So don't devalue what you have done. Even your education here is really important.
So there's, switching topics a little bit, there's this buzz right now around getting the right jobs. And if it's so competitive out there, what can we do? There's tons of advice. We can read all about it on social media and by Googling, but what's really working in your experience, and what tools can we use to attract the right employers, the right clients, et cetera?
Well, I kind of hate to say it because it sounds so cliche and you hear it all over, but personal branding is an important thing, and it's one of the only ways to kind of distinguish yourself now. Speaking about that competition that we just mentioned, personal branding is, use your social media, write a blog. This isn't about showing off your skills at social media or your blogging expertise. It's to show that you take yourself seriously enough that you've created a presence for yourself. Think of those things as the living business card that you have. So you create a small brand for yourself by doing that as well. And not only can an employer then do a little checkup on you and say, well, wow, they write such interesting things, they get more insight into your thoughts. They can also see if your brand is the right fit for their brand, because all employers are essentially brands. And also, if you know how to stand for your own brand, there's some confidence that comes on the employer side that you will be able to stand for their brand one day. So it's not a very complicated thing, really. Just make yourself a business card of some sort, throw some blog up there, show your style off. And, it even comes down to how you dress yourself, of course, and kind of make it all be one package, and people will want that then.
Do you have any examples of where you've seen this really done well?
Yes, definitely. A couple of my brightest hires ever showed up for entry-level brand management merchandising jobs. That is not a creative field necessarily. I believe one of them was from FIT, one was from LIM, and both of them showed up with a portfolio. You might wonder, well, what portfolio does a brand manager or, someone who's not even had a job yet, mind you, they'd only had internships, what portfolio could they bring? They brought me some Excel forms that they had worked on, forms they'd created, graphics work they'd done, even if it was simple stuff in Word, even if it was, well, my boss asked me to make a sign for something. They just brought me examples of the different things they could do, which showed me that they took themselves seriously. One of them also had a business card. She, again, fresh out of school, it just said her name, contact info, and her specialty, which is her major. And, they also interviewed really well. They were conscious. They spoke about what they had done in their internships with pride. They understood that even those kind of menial tasks they had done fit into the bigger picture, because it's a big problem when someone walks into an entry-level job and seems to only have lost lofty aspirations of stuff they won't be touching for years, but no understanding of how the little things that they'll be doing in their first few years actually are the backbone of the entire company. So it's also worth noting that both of those people, I did not respond to their first email. I responded to their second one. They both emailed twice to apply for the same job. That's going back to the this not for me opportunity thing. They didn't think, oh, I didn't hear back, well, they mustn't want me. No, they simply understood that the person on the other end is busy, and if you want to be seen, you want to be heard, say something, Put your name in front of someone's eyes more than once. So they kind of did everything, and that's what made them so successful.
So just to kind of wrap up here, if I had to give one final piece of advice to you, it would really be to pay attention to the rise of the social entrepreneur. And this is a person whose entire business or a portion of their business is focused around an entrepreneurial attitude of advancing positive social changes. It's a topic that's very important to me and my company, which is in the sustainable textile business. We've also seen it with Warby Parker's Do Good mission, buy a pair of sunglasses, give a pair to those in need. We see it with wearable tech that's working to improve people's lives and health, and I think it's a trend that's here to last. And it shouldn't be ignored, whether you're working in a current business and trying to bring some of that social entrepreneurism in, or whether you're building your own business. So Aparna, can you give us just one final piece of advice and for people who are trying to strike out on their own, or any lessons you've learned along the way?
I think the biggest lesson I've learned along the way is to stop striving for perfection. It's something that, especially as creatives, we will keep tinkering and delaying until that thing is perfect. And this was something I learned throughout my career, and in a kind of crash course, painful way, maybe, in the last year of being on my own, which is that, you lose so much ground and you gain so little knowledge when you're stuck on making something perfect. Instead of perfection, aim for discretion. Is this good enough to get my message across? Do I seem professional? Are people going to understand what I'm doing? Am I shortchanging myself in any way? Or am I stressing over that one button that goes on the inside of the thing that no one's going to see? Don't get hung up on the tiniest things. And, of course, if you're making a couture gown for somebody, absolutely get hung up on it. But you should be getting paid appropriately for that too, But while you're stressing over some detail, instead of launching your product or whatever it is, someone else is moving into that space. Someone else is taking that opportunity. You even see it with applying for jobs. I don't know how many of my career clients who I was working with last year would say, oh yeah, I saw this job listing, I'm going to apply for it probably next week sometime. That is very confusing to me. I understand that maybe you're busy, but waiting 2 weeks, 3 weeks to apply for a job, there's 200 to 250 applications going on to every single job listing out there. Why wait? In that period of time, someone could be getting hired. Instead of, I'm going to tweak my resume to perfection, make sure it's good. Be kind of harsh with yourself when it comes to that kind of thing. Is this good? Is it good? It doesn't have to be perfect. Is it going to communicate what I need to get across? And that's really the biggest piece of advice I can offer you.
Can we flip to the last slide, please? So just kind of as some key takeaways here of what we talked about: entrepreneurship, consciousness, opportunity, professionalism, confidence. We think these are the characteristics that really distinguish you. They matter whether you're in the 9-to-5 job and looking to get hired by a company, interviewing for a company, or building a team within that company. And they also are the very foundation of your own entrepreneurial ventures should you choose to go out on your own. Just a little positivity at the end. New York is consistently ranked as one of the best cities for entrepreneurs, especially in fashion and technology. We think you're in the right place at the right time, and with the right attitude, you will succeed. So thank you. I think we're now doing questions, so if anybody has them, I think there are mics set up. Feel free to ask about anything.
Yes. And feel free to ask Stephanie questions as well.
You have a question? I think they want to put recording.
Oh, he's got the mic there. Okay.
So I have a question. What is a realistic approach to starting a company, and how much funding, out of your own bank account or from somebody else, investment, what is a realistic approach to that if you want to strike out on your own? I mean, how much realistically should you have in your bank account? That's always a question that's running through my mind. in terms of being realistic, but I know in entrepreneurship, you have to have so much faith in yourself and find ways to be a spendthrift. But you read all these stories and stuff and you see other people, how they did it, and your path is obviously your own path, and everybody's unique. But for me, I'm always wondering, like, how much realistically should I invest in myself financially?
Well, I could give you the lawyer answer, it depends, but that doesn't really obviously answer the question. I mean, yes, it does depend upon, I think, the personal circumstances and what you're trying to build and what you're trying to do. But the amazing thing right now is that there are so many creative ways to go about producing your product, and the incredible resources, especially in New York, that are here, that you can completely do things on a budget and get a lot of things done with these creative solutions. You can partner with the right people who have the certain skills and assets that you need. You could agree to put in an initial contribution to the company of a certain amount if you have that available. But then, as Aparna was speaking, and she can speak more too, of course, there are crowdfunding options. There are some other groups now in New York, I know, that invest in you as an individual before you even start a business, just when you have an idea, and then you pay them back a little bit over time if you make money. So there are ways and workarounds now, and I'd be happy to give you some resources after this that you can look at of how to kind of creatively finance and structure your business and just get it out there. But the best thing, as Aparna was saying, I think, is don't wait for it to be a perfect product and a complete solution and everything done. Just start getting stuff out there, get your website up, get your brand out there on social. That's all free. And by doing that and starting to generate interest, funding and money and opportunities will come to you.
I can probably, I understand where that question comes from because I've asked myself the same thing, of course. And, out of the 3 ventures that I started, the Talent Collective, took absolutely no money whatsoever to start. That was me leveraging the people I knew around me, classmates, friends, free, forums online where you could find emerging talent. Ultimately then, we're like, okay, you need a team of 30 models and you need 10 people in hair and makeup, and you need some dressers, and, you offer to get them dinner, you treat them well, they are all happy to work with you for very little. You say, well, I'm going to get photographers in too, you're all going to get pictures. Barter, leverage resources. We put those shows on for so little, it's kind of ridiculous. And nobody, the designers who participated paid, I think, $400 to show their line to that many people. And there was no upfront contribution from me. Of course, future ventures, launching my own clothing line, that definitely took some money, but I've been working for a number of years. I had set up a Ambition account, which is just a savings account I forget exists, and automatically withdrew money from every paycheck, and that turned into quite the stash over time. And how much money exactly you need is something that is best determined by talking to someone who's done it, really. Anyone else? Question? Yeah.
What is your best advice as a manager or owner of a business dealing with employees that are the creative type and getting them to do what you want them to do?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, one thing, for me, I had an advantage being the creative type as well, so I could empathize, and quite frankly, I think a lot of creatives just want your empathy. They're like, I'm not crazy. You have to understand there's some logic to what I'm thinking, even though it looks like this. Being sensitive to a creative person's thought process does a lot for you. And then processing everything they're saying, and then if you have a kind of systematic, if you're more of a systematic thinker, then, see if their solution really isn't the right solution before being like, okay, wait, that makes no sense, we're not doing it your way. Maybe they might go in this sort of path, but it comes out right, you know? It takes a little bit of being actually a process-oriented person to even be able to look at a creative person's thought process and see logic in it. If you don't necessarily have both those sides, you know, find a colleague, someone trusted in the company, or even someone outside the company who you can speak to on a regular basis and say, hey, listen, so-and-so employee is doing this, and they're making me crazy, and, you know, the work's getting done, but I'm always feeling like it's last minute, and it's insane, and because that's really what you deal with a lot of times, the creative process, as opposed to something more logical. I hope that helps a bit.
Yes, thank you.
Great.
Hi. Both of you have started more than one entrepreneurial venture. And so I wondered if you could each speak about something that you learned from your earlier ventures that's been helping you in your current business.
You want to take it first?
Well, I guess for me, you know, obviously it started as a corporate attorney, which feels like a lifetime ago, only a few years ago. But my journey into my first company was just partnering with a friend who was creative and had this idea, and she had already built the idea, she had already created the product, and she needed the business and legal framework around it in order to kind of push it out there and get it to market. So that's kind of how we came about on that business, and learned a lot while we were going through it. But from that experience, from listening to customers and seeing kind of where the touch points are, where the problems are in the industry, and how I can fix that, I was then able to create a new product, which is my new company, totally around that problem. So instead of having something already created that I had to push out there, it was really helpful and valuable to see the problem and then create the solution around that.
In terms of each of my past ventures, Collective 7 was the name of the talent collective that I started actually before I had even graduated here. From that one, I learned the value of leveraging your network and kind of bartering and trading, which is so crucial. I also learned, what was it? I think that was really the biggest takeaway from that one. From making my own line, which was my second venture, the biggest takeaway there was, well, how to do everything yourself. You have to become resourceful. I learned resourcefulness as doing that because I was working, 10 plus hours a day at work, and then I was coming home and working till 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, maybe not sleeping. That only lasts for so long. So yeah, and then I have to say, even the day job, that wasn't my venture, but because so much of the wide berth that I was given there by my boss, who was supposed to be here tonight but could not be because she has the flu, it's really important. Don't burn your bridges. You want that support. She gave me a lot of opportunity to take charge of her team. I learned management and the interpersonal part of how to manage team, how to get things out, how to dissociate from the work and make sure, but still ensure the quality was there, because quite frankly, even if your business starts with one person, eventually it needs to be more. That means that it has grown.
Thank you. Regarding your fashion line, is it still open?
It is, let's put it this way, it's not closed.
Okay. So my question is, can you talk a little bit about how it felt to not be operating a fashion line after you started it? I think a lot of people think about success as a linear journey where you just start and then you're successful. So, what did it feel like to put that on hold, and what inspired you to move to your next success?
Yeah, it was very hard. I remember it was probably 2010, fall. I remember these dates because usually they were pretty, seasons even of high impact, let's put it that way. I was working nearly around the clock between my job and the fashion line. I had put out one collection, sold it. I was developing a second collection. And as you know, with the cadence of a fashion line, you are selling one, producing the next, and designing another at the same time. So yeah, one person, you can't do that. I didn't celebrate my birthday that year, didn't go out for Halloween, didn't go home for Thanksgiving, and didn't go home for Christmas. And that was basically like meltdown time, because those are 4 months in a row of no break whatsoever. It was a breaking point, and I had to say, am I going to continue my fashion line, or am I going to focus on my day job? And don't think, when I say day job, I don't mean it in a bad way. I just mean this is what I was employed to do during the day. It was a really hard moment, and I had to call my parents and be like, I'm not doing it anymore. And because for me, their approval is extremely important. So it was very challenging to close the doors, but I didn't make any official announcements about it. I didn't do anything special to say the doors are closed. I still have that email address, the website's still up, I still receive emails, stylists want to pull, and that was years ago. So I don't feel like I gave up on something. I actually left it in a place where I can pick it up in a second, anytime. I just stopped operating, so to say. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
This one right up there.
Going back to crowdfunding, I was wondering, in the tech hub, if money isn't being funded, like if you don't reach your goal, I've heard that a lot of the times investors or venture capitals will end up not investing in your company because they see that as a failure. So, or something along those lines. Could you speak more about that, and also, tech, like hubs around the city that you know of?
Sure. To answer the first part of your question in terms of crowdfunding campaigns, I think that may have been true when these crowdfunding sites originally started. But now, just because of the sheer volume around how many different platforms there are and how many people are doing it, that it's not such a telltale sign anymore that you were a failure, that you didn't succeed. In fact, it's become a really positive PR and marketing tool. So some people do it and set the bar really high for their campaign, knowing they won't get funded and not wanting the money and the obligations to actually send people products or do whatever they have to do to get the crowdfunding campaign. But just because they want the press and the PR and marketing to get out there and let people test their product and see what they think and what they feel. So I think kind of the negative stigma has shifted now, and it's not really there anymore. But because of all these alternative platforms and programs and accelerators, especially in New York, that they have, and I'm happy to talk to you afterwards and give you a list of some accelerators around fashion, tech, and technology in general, that there are a lot more opportunities for that kind of one-on-one getting in with angels and VCs, and starting to build that relationship early on, even before your product is finished, and then as it develops and grows, they kind of guide you and become mentors and then help you finance it.
I would just add to that it's, if you use crowdfunding as a test, and like I said, you're conscious of the process, you're aware of what you were doing, the fact that you even attempted any kind of testing on your product puts you in the favor of an investor or VC.
Stephanie, can you explain real quick what fashion tech is? Because I know that's sort of one of those buzzwords, but what does it actually mean, and what are tech?
It's a good question, and it's kind of been used in many different ways. It's kind of like the word sustainable. It gets thrown around, and nobody really understands or knows exactly what it means. But it's kind of this new, really emerging strong in the past 2 or 3 years, I guess I would say, convergence of fashion and technology, and the ways in which technology can be used to kind of help shape the fashion industry, improve things in the fashion industry. And I think it kind of encapsulates everything from the wearable tech field, which I'm sure you guys hear about, and actually embedding technology into your fashion products, to things like what I've built, which are e-commerce platforms and analytics and tools online that you can use in your fashion business to help kind of drive it forward and move it forward. So it kind of covers a broad range of things, but it's an emerging hot field. There are a lot of acceleration programs kind of focused specifically around fashion tech, and it definitely can be beneficial and helpful for you in whatever area of the industry you end up going into, because inevitably somehow technology is going to play some part in that.
I think we have time for one more question. Oh, right behind me.
Hello, thank you so much for being here. Very insightful information for us business owners. And I was wondering, you mentioned the word accelerator. What exactly does that mean?
Accelerators, there's a few different forms they take. Oftentimes they are groups organized. They have a number of different resources. People who are already in the industry, entrenched, have experience, they pull together a bunch of resources, education, lessons of sorts, and or investor resources. And they'll often take a small class, you could say, of people who have, you write in and you say, well, this is my idea and this is what I've done. And you apply for these things a lot of times. And then you go into these programs and it literally is meant to just accelerate your process. And a lot of these exist in New York.
I should note that in return for that kind of service, they are great and they offer a lot of mentorship in the classes and funding opportunities, but they do take a percentage of your company in exchange for that space and mentorship, usually in like a 3 to 4 month period.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It was really a pleasure to have you here today, Aparna, Stephanie.
We do have a sheet up front. If anybody wants to kind of sign up to get more information or talk to us, please feel free to reach out. We hope to continue the conversation in a Google Hangout or a session afterwards. So please come ask us any questions or sign up.
Yeah, we're all about just reach out, email, whatever it is. We're happy to talk to you guys.
Thank you.